Hi, friends. You are listening to the EntreEd Talk podcast, where we feature amazing educators and entrepreneurs showcasing how you can bring entrepreneurship into the classroom. We believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. I am your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am so glad you chose to join me on this journey. Let's go. Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the EntreEd Talk podcast. I am super excited to have my friend Shannon Watson here with me today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a bio. Shannon calls herself a mild-mannered reporter by day, but renegade writer by night. That's awesome. Shannon is an author, and she's working on her book, and she's an avid reader and history buff, and spends most of her time in the fabled lands of Camelot and Avalon, and that is from where she writes. This is going to be super fun. Hi, Shannon. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Toy. Thanks for having me.
This is great. So I'm going to have Shannon share a little bit about herself and her journey, but I just wanted to say quickly that we have spoken to many authors on this podcast, as our listeners know, but we've never spoken to an author in the middle of the process. So she is on her own entrepreneurial journey. So welcome, Shannon. And why don't you get us started and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you got to where you are today with this awesome book.
Well, thanks. Well, I think it started when I was very little. My mother liked musicals, and she got me hooked on the musical Camelot, the Richard Burton, Robert Goulet version of it, at least the soundtrack, when I was really very little. I was still in single digits. And yeah, from there, as I got older, I started reading about the history behind it. And that's what really hooked me. I love archaeology and history and reading, and which is kind of the cornerstone for any writer. Is you never want to write more than you read. So I'm very fortunate with that. But I love digging down to the archaeological bedrock behind all of the myths. And Arthurian Legend is the largest body of literature in the world. So it's a lot of digging. And I use that as the basis for my book, which I've been researching and writing for a long time in between and around jobs and school and all life and all the other things that get in the way. And then I found this great class, and I'm taking through Georgetown University with Toy and with Eric Koester and Haley Newland, and I'm having a great time with it. And I'm learning, and it's a roller coaster ride, but we're actually getting to the end much faster with a little help from my friends. So that's been great.
That's awesome. Yeah, we are in this class together, and it has been, as she's right, it's been a roller coaster. You are absolutely correct. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Eric Koester and this awesome Book Creators Project. If anyone wants to know more about that, I can put it in the show notes. But we interviewed him on this podcast very early on in the podcast, and just absolutely loved the interview. A wonderful, amazing guy. And then this program has just brought together such a great group of people, which is why I thought it'd be awesome to have a few folks on here to share your story, because it's so entrepreneurial. And that's what we do with entrepreneurship education. And we want to encourage young people, adults, everyone to be entrepreneurs and do what resonates with them and follow their passions. Yeah. So speaking of this book, I did not know that Arthurian Legend was the largest body of literature. I did not know that at all. And I didn't know much about it, but I read The Mists of Avalon in high school. And that kind of sent me on a mini journey, not quite as big as yours, but that was just such a different perspective of the legend that I fell in love with that book. It was really cool. Big, huge book though.
Yes. Yeah, it's big. This is also big, and it has a lot of things in common with that. It's multiple women, some of the lesser known women, as well as some of the more popular names that everybody knows from Arthurian Legend. And those are the narrators. I have one main narrator, and this is the first in a series of 10 books, which will have increasingly more narrators as we go on. But I thought I'd start with 3, and believe me, that's been more than enough. But it's nice to have an updated women's point of view, because they had a lot more rights back then than we ever think that they did. And they had a larger role to play than most people would think of when they think of the Middle Ages, or in this case, the Dark Ages, which are the early Middle Ages.
Wow. No, I didn't. So you're going to write 10 books?
Yeah, I've already researched them. I've already outlined them. I've already written parts of many, and most of all of them really, but I think so. If I don't drop dead sometime during this process before I get to the end, I will.
That is amazing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that is so cool. So, well, that is a really big endeavor, but this, even just writing one book is a big endeavor. Can you share what inspired you to just get this process rolling? So you've been working on your book for a while, but getting it rolling and actually committing to this process is pretty big.
It is. Well, I've always been committed to it, but my best friend's son took this class last semester and he vouched for it. He brought it up. He brought it to my attention. He is much younger. He started writing he wrote his first book in high school. And he just says this is a phenomenal program. He found it through college and he's enjoying it. And he says it's great. And he was right. It's fantastic. I'm learning a lot, not just about the book, but how to market it, how to use social media properly. And I thought I knew because I did have a company that trained me on social media a few years ago, but it's outdated because, as you know, technology and social media, they grow and change so fast that you have to stay up to date with how to use it, how often, and who to target on what platforms. And so this course has been helping me with that too. And I just enjoy kind of tying it into the Arthurian stuff as well. You know, I was thinking about having like a festival Friday for all the ancient pagan and old, festivals and holidays and things, and just using that on social media. So that's coming up too, to tie it into the book. Yeah.
I am scared of social media.
It's scary.
Thinking about how do I do a TikTok about these things? It's not scary for me to just use social media in my life, but to use it as a tool. That's my boss can attest to this. I could not wait to give over the company Twitter.
Here you go.
Shout out to Eugene. He asked me one time when I was doing all of that stuff, do you mind if somebody else takes? I was like, oh, heck yeah, here you go.
Gone, right? Yeah.
It's hard to try to be natural, and it's a very strange space. Yeah. So what has been your most favorite thing so far through this process?
Through the whole writing process or just the class part of it?
Either one.
Either one. I think my favorite part of it is seeing, as I research the characters, I've translated every single name. I've gone back into the costumes, the religion, and I love best to see the characters come alive again and walk and talk and breathe and laugh, and as they might have, at least. I like to get as close to them as I can as far as the history goes. And so seeing them come alive again is probably my favorite thing. I love it. It's so fun. I took a research trip to the UK for 3 weeks a while back, and it was great and really exciting to go over the same ground that these people walked on. And, you're kind of breathing the same air. It's a little bit more polluted air nowadays, but, but than it was in the 5th century, but it's fun and it's exciting and it sure is beautiful. Scotland and the Isle of Man and England, gorgeous. And the people are wonderful.
That's on my list. I really have been to Europe, but not explored that part. I really want to go to the Isle of Man. That sounds amazing.
Oh, I love the Isle of Man. The people are very warm-hearted, welcoming people. It seems like the colder it gets, the warmer the people.
That's kind of funny.
It did. It seemed like it when I was over there. They are all wonderful people, though. It was really, really lovely. And that's where my my heritage is too. A good chunk of it is from the UK and the British Isles. So it's kind of, for me, it's like family history as well. So it's very exciting to me. Yeah,
Wow, that's so
we've had a good
cool.
time.
What, so on the flip side of that, what has been the most challenging part?
I think ripping up the book in the class, I've come with this whole book. You think, oh, good, I'm ahead. I'm going to get ahead. Nope, not at all. It is very difficult to tear your baby apart and put it back together. And it's exciting to see like someone else's point of view, someone who really knows what they're doing. I have a great editor, Margaret, and she's fantastic, but she's teaching me how to self-edit. And she's not just editing my book, she's showing me how you have to think about how to initially put a book together. And in my case, how to take it apart and re-string the beads. And it's not easy, but it's been a really big learning curve. And but it's difficult. It's very difficult to take all your hard work apart and to detach yourself from it so that you don't, you have to step back and see it objectively, and you don't want to hang on to things that don't belong in the book. If it doesn't make the boat go faster, then you just don't do it, and that's been a real self-discipline, an act of self-discipline and a learning curve there. That's probably the most difficult though. For sure.
We talked a little bit before we started the podcast, but I just think that has to probably be way harder than starting from the beginning, to have to take it apart. I know when I had to take things, when I've had to take things down, like I'm working on a dissertation and different pieces of that, and I've had to take it from 10 pages to 5 pages, or just smaller things. And it's like, it's so much harder to tear it down than it is to build it from scratch. So how do you feel that the structure of the course and having a cohort with you has helped? I know we've talked to several authors, and we've never really dove in to the conversation with anybody, but they all say the same thing. Writing that book was so hard, and that, at least the first one. And I guess that's because you have to learn all of those things. We just had our friend on, Brian Weisfeld, a couple of weeks ago, because he's on his third book. And it's an entrepreneurial series for young readers. And it's amazing. It's an amazing series, but the first book took so long. And then the second 2 books were really, he like got this cadence down. So anyway, so the question is, how do you feel that the structure of having a course and having a cohort have really helped you keep momentum and motivation to get to the finish line?
For me, I think it's not like getting in your head. I'll, like any good author, I can get in my head and walk around for quite some time. And having people to talk to about it brings you back out of your head. Sometimes you think you're the only one that's losing sleep or walking around in a daze or worrying about this or frightened about that, and you start talking to everyone else, or even if you don't say a word and they start talking and you just hear them, it will come out. They all say the same thing. We all worry about the same things. We all get hung up on the same things. We're all struggling with, even if it's something that only a few of you are struggling with, it's a huge help. You're not alone. You're not even the only one going on this journey at this moment. That's been really helpful. Everybody's very encouraging of each other and very supportive, and that, they'll listen even if they are writing something totally different to what you're writing. They still are very, very generous with listening and support. And then you get to be supportive of them too. And that helps as well. Sometimes doing something nice for somebody else is the thing that makes you feel better when nothing else will. So I found that's really kind of been really fun, and it's nice to have a community.
Yeah, I think that's really the key of this whole thing. And also having those navigators that are like Haley, or some of the other folks that have been through it and are just a few steps ahead of you, because just having that, you're like, okay, they can do it, and they're talking about their struggles. And so it makes it easier for you to be able to do, to say, okay, well, I think I can do this too.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's neat. I thought many times, and maybe you have the same experience, but you have a different, because you have a different lens, because you already wrote most of this book. But I would have never in a million years written this the way that the way that we're being guided to write it, where I would have been very linear. I would have been very, it had to be perfect before I moved on to the next thing. And I would have probably gotten stuck in the edit somewhere in the first couple of writings and then just given up because
Analysis paralysis.
because I would have just obsessed, and then it would have been too hard. And it's blowing my mind how kind of free it is. I'm just going to write about this thing up here and that thing over there and this thing out of date, out of time, like out of all the things, way out of order. But it makes it easier to do it like that, because when I get stuck on something, I'll just move on to just put that down and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know I've been jumping around too. And I'm like, nope, got to get this done. These three are easier and they're more like, I'm going to do these 3 chapters. Then I'm going to go over here and do the tough one, or whatever it takes. And it's kind of nice. You give yourself a break, because they're giving you a break. They're giving you the freedom to do. They're telling you it's okay to do it however you have to do it. Try different things. Because I do get like that. I have all these templates I've created for myself with my writing and with my research. For God's sake, it's such a huge cast of characters. You have got to have some method of like containing and tracking them. I mean, it's like George R.R. Martin or J.K. Rowling. They have huge casts of characters, and they say she works with a chart on her desk. I can understand it. I've got charts, so many charts and templates in my computer. I could write a book just on writing a book, just from the stuff I've had to create just to track all of the research. So it's nice to have something like that, where there are other people who've said, well, why don't you try it this way? Or it's okay to do that, or you don't have to do that. It's so helpful for someone who's that hyper structured to hear, oh no, you don't have to do it that way. I almost need permission for that. I need someone to give me permission to like loosen up,
I think a lot of us are in that kind of situation, because this, like I said, I would have been much more rigid on myself than.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm surprised that it's, I was thinking the other day, because yours is different than mine, but as a memoir, it's I would be journaling anyway, right? So this is it's been very therapeutic to be able to do that, and then know that I'm going to get to share it with somebody is a little bit scary, but also pretty cool. And it's very freeing.
Well, that's a way that's really helped me. My editor is very character-based, pro-character-based. And I was struggling with my lead character's voice, because I was trying to base it on me, and to some extent. And I have had a lot of issues in my past with depression and fear and things like that. And so the editor has been asking questions that have drawn out, and it's come out that the theme of the book, that even though Arthurian Legend is very action-based and I have all these different characters, the theme is fear and overcoming it, and how most people, myself included, we would like to just deny it, that it's there, or try to push it away and get rid of it. But what you really have to do is look it in the eye and work through it, because fear is one of those things that gets in behind you, gets in the back of your head. You sweep it under the rug, the monster gets bigger. And so that's kind of a theme. And so I have a couple different characters in there who deal with it I've got my 3 main ones who deal with it, fear, very differently. And one of them deals with it more like I do. Another, the other 2 have different relationships with it. So it's turned into kind of the bottom line of the book is dealing with fear and how different people handle it. So, and how it affects your life, but nobody's without it. And that's kind of a freeing thought for me too. And I was like, but every now and again, I'm like, oh God, do I have to write about that? Like, you have to dig deeper. And I'm like, oh, I don't like this at all. It's very like, no, I just want to, can I write about something pretty now? I don't want to write about all these beastly things like fear and nightmares and, So it's been really, really good for me. And it is, like you said, it's extremely cathartic, but sometimes you do have to reach deep and pull it all out, and that it's kind of wrenching.
But it's so good to also to be able to show that. And even way back then, people had these same kinds of things, because it's just a human condition. And for so long, we've been so afraid to talk about the hard things, just
Yes.
in general. And I'm just excited that seems to be changing, not just through the book project, but just in the world in
In the
general.
world.
Like Brene Brown and all these people who are now, they're sharing the hard stuff. And it's, and when I read people like that, or when I read stuff like what you're writing, I'm like, you know what? We need to talk about this, because when you do, you find out that we're all just people.
Yeah, we're a global community now. And I think we're really becoming that. I'm hoping that one of the long-term effects of coronavirus will be that we really, in truth, become a global community and start living like that, because that's how you survive. You hang together, or you hang separately. So I think we need to all hang together. And I'm hoping for that. I hope for that every day. So I'm hoping one of the things in this world that's always brought people together is art, and books are one of the art forms that have survived centuries, which is amazing. And we've gotten more efficient at them now. Now we have these handy dandy electronic delivery systems. So that's really great for us as authors.
My favorite audio books.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, there's that. Yeah. All these different forms.
Before Corona, before all of this, I traveled quite a bit for work, and oh my gosh, I miss it now. But that's what I did, because you can't really read in the car and drive. It's kind of hard to do. And so I just started building this library of audiobooks, and I know that's one of the first things I will do is record the audio version, because that's my go-to for books. But it still counts as reading, though. I think it still counts.
Yeah, I think it does, actually. It still counts as art. Absolutely. It's really two forms of art, because it's the written word as spoken word. So
Yeah.
it's very important. I have some of my poetry was recorded, is copyrighted in the Library of Congress, and they actually had some of my poems on tape that they recorded aloud. So that was nice too, to be selected for that.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
What an honor.
Yeah, I love writing poetry. And it serves me well in the book too. So that's kind of nice. All of my books have poems in them. Yeah, even the ones that aren't part of this series. So that's kind of nice.
Wow. That's cool. I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. We'll see how it holds up to Miss Babylon, but
we're all going to be out of money, because we're all going to end up buying each other's.
I already bought someone's. I already did. I liked her cover, and Haley Newland told me to check her out on Instagram, and I liked what I saw, and I liked what she was doing, and she's really neat. She's a Slovakian author who took a Slovakian fable and turned it into fantasy or historical fantasy. Yeah. And she has a really beautiful cover, and yeah, I'm like, it's amazing all the different authors and all the different ideas. We have some phenomenally bright people.
Yeah, it's really an honor to be part of this crew. It really, yeah. I mean, I just you included, I've met so many amazing people that, like, I've said since day one, I think if nothing else, like that, this experience has just been so eye-opening and wonderful, and people from all over the country and the world, and just it's really cool.
Really inspiring.
What do you think? So winter's coming, and you publish this book. What happens next? What do you do next? Do you start the second one, or what do you think you're going to do?
Well, they've talked to me a little bit about, the promotional stuff like podcasts and book. They've talked about book tours and things like that. So if not that, or in addition to that, definitely starting the second one, because it's already outlined and in there. And I'm already thinking in the back of my mind here and there, like, what am I going to do and how am I going to structure that before I really started differently than I did with the first one, because it's a different ball game now. I've got more knowledge. I've been reading the Story Grid and Save the Cat and different things that are about structuring your book. And what an eye opener. I mean, it's a totally different ball game. So, but yeah, definitely. I think I'll be working on book 2. When I started the class, I was working on book 1, which is The Tyrant and the Twins. And that's the first in the series, The Annals of Anavir. And Anavir being my lead character, that's the Guinevere character. And then I was also working on a book about Gilles de Rais, who was one of Joan of Arc's captains, who was falsely accused of murder. And so that's kind of almost like a medieval murder mystery. And then I was working on a third book that at the same time, because I'm crazy like that, on it's this first in a series of 3, and that's about it's kind of a haunted, like a ghost story kind of thing. So that's part of my haunted house history series. But I had to put those down because this class is very much focused and it's demanding. You want to get that push to get the book out. And so I'm going to go to book 2 and we'll see, get working on that. And I may take the class again to help with that. I'm thinking about doing that. I think it's vastly helpful,
It truly is. If I think about doing another one ever, I would definitely take the class again. I don't know if that's in the cards for me, but we'll see. That's amazing. So you've got all kinds of different series.
Yes.
And that's neat. So can you share a little bit more about, without spoiling anything, about what kind of the overall idea of The Tyrant and the Twins is about?
Sure. Yes. So it starts with Anavir, who is the Guinevere character, as a young girl, and she doesn't know where she came from. Children in those days were fostered out. So we've got Anavir, her half sister, Rafa, and Quenhild, who is totally on the other side of the battle line. She is Utish, which is like Anglo-Saxon. And she is about 5 years older, and she wants to grow up to be a warrior, a shield maiden. With that culture, with the Germani, they had choices like that. They could stay at home or go into politics. They could go into herbalism. They could do a lot of things. But being a warrior, a lot of the women did fight alongside the men. And they did in several of the other cultures around them in the 5th century, like the Irish and the Picts. The Romano-Britons, which are kind of the culture that Anavir and her sister come from, not so much. They were a little bit more Romanized, and the Romans were women stayed at home, but they're also part Pictish. So there's a little bit of something else there too. And it's kind of fun to play with the cultural aspects, because then you get things like religion and politics that come in, and you know what that does. That creates conflict. No conflict, no story. And there's a lot of story here. So I know more about 5th century Britain politics than I do about modern day politics, but
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, who knows anything about that? So it's a lot of that 5th century politics in the UK, and as well as the continent. And it plays a real heavy role. And a lot of times when you're missing something, like they always say, is Arthur really history or not? I kind of look at the Obi-Wan Kenobi, or maybe it's Yoda theory of it. If you look at, it was Attack of the Clones, that movie, you see Obi-Wan Kenobi asking Yoda about a missing planet. And Yoda tells him, well, the planet's missing, but all the stars and moons, or that satellite around it, are still there. And if you can't find your exact planet, you can certainly locate it by what's around it, the culture, the religion. Everything that we do have tells us that there was something there and there was something going on. And so having kind of really narrowed down the archaeology and the geography of it, the story kept shrinking geographically until I realized exactly where this was happening. It was more of a territorial dispute in some ways in borders Scotland in the 5th century. It was a smaller story than, you know, it wasn't the king of some great big medieval kingdom like we think. Castles were more like wooden frontier forts. And if you look at like Braveheart, you're dealing with that. You're dealing with Scottish warriors in a really brutal time and climate, and trying to hold the narrowest point of the island against invaders. And that's kind of what that story is the broader picture. The global story is more about. But it's so much fun because, again, you're seeing a whole world come to life. It's almost like having to recreate a Wonderland or a Narnia or Neverland or something, but you Middle Earth, but you, because it's so long ago, we don't have that anymore. There are laws and peoples and languages that were what they were doing then that don't exist anymore. We only have them in fragments like Gothic and Pictish languages, or the spoken languages that are dead now, like Latin. You know, and English is even a sort of a remnant of the Anglo-Saxon, the Old English. So it's interesting to see. I'm working in more than 20 languages. And I'm only fluent in one. I can just read a dictionary real well. But or a lot of dictionaries, but our Wiktionary is my best friend. I have like a heart-shaped picture frame with Wiktionary's picture in it on my nightstand. You know, it's been very, very, very helpful. But I love doing that because when you see these names come to life too, if you're looking up a person's name or even a fort and you get some boring translation like, oh, fort by the river, that's when you know that you actually have it. It's not going to be, oh, you know, the blood fort or the fancy schmancy. It just doesn't, it's usually boring and kind of prosaic, but that's when you also know, and you get titles like, oh, that means Duke or Duke of War, or that name means, you know, man of valor. It's very simple and it's not as sexy overtly, you know, it's not like, oh, the bluebird flies south, you know, but that's how you know you got it right. You weren't using your imagination, you're just translating it, and that's what it's there as some title or some geographic designation that tells you you're on the right track, because it's everyday stuff, but it's real. And they are that means you're dealing in real world time, and that's very exciting because that's when you know you're actually being true to the places and the people and the things that happened, and that's not a myth. There are myths overlaid onto it and in it, but it was a real place and these are real people, which is exciting because it's like seeing all your fairy tales come back to life.
Yeah, and you're like a detective too. So that's gotta be cool when you finally stumble upon the thing and you know you have it and you're like,
Oh
oh,
man.
that has to be so neat. It's like solving a really complicated problem, and that's so cool. I never thought about the Arthurian legend that way, because just kind of like what you said, you just think, oh, that's so long ago. Did it exist? Did it not exist? Real? Is it not? But to be able to find things like that and go, oh, wow.
Well, for instance, I came across something yesterday, and it happens all the time. I was going, you know, you can't remember everything. And the older you get, the less you can remember. And there's a lot of stuff. So I was writing about the Grail ceremony. And one thing we know is they carry the hallows down the, you know, the Holy Grail being one of the hallows. Well, the first hallows that they carry down the aisle in the processional are these giant candelabrum. Right. And everybody's like, this is a very mysterious ceremony. So I'm looking, because I knew I had to go back over the early Christian ceremony. So I looked up some of my notes, and I was looking not for that. I was looking for the functions, the priestess, a deaconess, an acolyte, the ostiaris who held the door. And it said, well, the acolytes in the early Christian ceremony, their job was to carry the candles down the aisle. And I went, click. There it is. The acolytes, that's an actual part of the ceremony. So this is part of a real ceremony, not just some fanciful made up Grail ceremony from Chrétien de Troyes or one of the other old, you know, romance writers. This is a real factual part of an early Christian ceremony where the acolytes carried the candelabrum down the processional. And I was thrilled because it's a very simple thing and it seems very obvious, but you have to put the two together. And I was looking for this. I was looking for an acolyte, not for what they did, but where they were in the hierarchy of the early Christian church. And sure enough, but I was writing about the Grail ceremony at the same time. So boom, it came together like that. And I was absolutely thrilled. I'm like, oh, that's perfect.
Oh, wow.
And it's just something like that almost every single day when I'm doing this, even though I've been doing this for years, I've been studying it. It's very exciting to see that stuff happen.
That
It
is,
really is.
that had to give you chills, like when that, like, oh,
Yeah. Goosebumps. Yeah,
I
seriously.
think acolytes, I'm not well versed in this, but I think that they still do that. And like I know that we've had them in our church and they come and they light the candles.
That's
So
right.
that's, but it's like very real. So that's like, oh, I've got it. That's so
It's
cool.
real world now. Yeah. And some of these things survived and some of them didn't. But when they survive like that, doesn't that kind of bring it into HD?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, it's like a discovery. It's like you're a archaeologist.
Yeah, I'm an armchair archaeologist. Yeah. That's the easy kind.
So, so we have a lot of educators that listen to this podcast and different entrepreneurs and things. And I'm sure I'm going to guess because I know teachers and how creative teachers are. They're amazing. That probably many of them have a story in them. So could you share maybe some advice you would give to a teacher or even a student or even a teacher to give to a student if they want to write a book? What would you say to them?
I can. I used to teach Montessori.
Oh, that's right.
I was a Montessori teacher for 5 years. So yeah, I can. And before that, I was also a tutor, and years before that, I was an assistant Montessori teacher. So yeah, I can. My nephew, actually, I was the one who started encouraging him to write too. So absolutely. I mean, for me, it's the number one thing, the first thing, the primary thing is to find the idea that fascinates you, the core, the kernel of it that fascinates you, and collect as much of that stuff that fascinates you as possible. Because here's the thing is, if you're writing just to write, you're writing and you're droning, it's going to, if you're bored, the reader will be bored. But if you're fascinated and excited about it, that excitement translates, it comes out on the page. And that's, you're not going to get every reader, but the readers that are excited or interested in that are going to be even more so. It translates, and it translates well. That's what you have to do, is find the love. What excites you is going to excite them, and that works.
That's perfect. And oh my gosh, it's such a perfect juxtaposition to just the entrepreneurial journey in general. And and even when you find that thing that fascinates you and you start to research and pull and explore, you might not end up at the end of the book with what you thought you were going to start with, but
no, you won't.
When we talk about the entrepreneurial journey, we talk about, okay, you have this problem that you want to solve, you have this thing that you're excited about, but usually by the end of it, you're still excited, maybe even more excited, but it's not what you thought it was going to be. Your outcome is very uncertain because it's like, so you go in that direction and you'll start pulling research and finding things. Like for me, I had a very specific direction, but it's actually changed so much since I started writing it. I've thrown away a bunch of things because I'm like, nope, but it just went into an entirely different direction. So that's really wonderful. And to not be afraid of that, I guess, is a really good point.
Yeah, if you'd asked me years ago when I started this, if I was writing about fear, I would have told you no. I would said no. I would have known what you meant. Yeah, and now that's kind of the internal conflict of the book. So there's the global conflict and the internal, and that's definitely the internal, but there's your character arc. So, it's also a universal theme. Not everybody wants to read about Arthurian stuff, but everybody struggles with fear. So I figured, yeah, and it's cheaper than therapy for me. So
well, it is probably better in many ways because
yeah.
you're really able to get, I mean, creativity is just something, I'm so excited to see all of these different ways that people are being creative and exploring that. And even in therapy, that's being, like we mentioned, that's being being used more and more.
Mhm.
Because something just comes out when you decide to let yourself be creative and have that free, it's very freeing.
Mhm. It is. It is. And many therapists will tell you to write anyway. So there's journals and dream journals and this and that. So yeah, I mean, you might end up writing a book anyhow, even though you didn't set out
Right?
to. So, you know.
That was kind of my thought process when Eric got in touch with his team, got in touch with me because I had mentioned I wanted to do this when he was on the podcast, and they remembered. And it was really interesting because it was at the perfect time. It was like I could have never done it before, that just because of where I was in my journey, my own personal journey. But it was neat because it was like, well, I'm kind of writing this stuff down anyway. Why not, why not make use of it?
Yeah, make it count.
So,
Why
and
not?
the
It's
hope is that you reach
reach your
the
goal.
hope,
Yeah.
and and if I can with my book and with your book, like really reach somebody and inspire them, I think that would be so amazing. If it's just one person,
Yeah.
I'm cool with it. Awesome.
Maybe
Well,
two, maybe one or two.
yeah, but I've reached out because of this. I've reached out to some authors and I've gotten responses. Just like, I love this book. I've never rated anything on Amazon and I've been doing that lately because I'm like, this book, this other person's book meant so much to me. And I feel like I need to tell them that because it's important that they know that it inspired me.
That it touched someone. Yeah. That it changed somebody's life or touched someone. That's every author's dream, but not everyone gets to hear it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, from being in school, you only hear the bad things.
Oh, yeah.
You only hear as a teacher, you only hear when you messed up, and you very, very rarely hear like from a parent or a kid that's like, oh, this was so great. I love this lesson, or thank you for doing that for my kid. And it's kind of the same thing. And people don't tend to share the wonderful stuff as much as the bad stuff, unfortunately.
Squeaky wheel syndrome. Yeah. That's
Oh,
true. That's true. Yeah.
well, Shannon, this has
Yeah.
been absolutely wonderful. I so appreciate you being on today, and tell everybody how they can get in touch with you if they want. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well, if they want to learn more about your journey and what you're doing and all about and how to get a book.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not sure yet because the book comes out in December 2021. They're saying December, maybe January, but probably December. And at that point, I am not sure, but it is The Tyrant and the Twins. And I publish under the pen name S.A. Watson. So that's my author's name. And I'm on, good Lord, let's see, what social media am I not on? I'm on Twitter and Facebook. And I have The Annals of Anavir is my Facebook page. I'm on Twitter as Shanavir. I'm on Instagram as Shanavir.
Like that. That's cool.
Yes. Well, that's my lead character is Anavir and I'm Shannon. So Shanavir. I'm on Pinterest as Shanavir Studios. I just started. I have a personal account as Shannon Watson, but I have Shanavir Studios account as a business account. So I'm trying to get that off the ground on Pinterest, and I'm also on LinkedIn. Cool. So pretty much anywhere. I think you can get hold of me just about anywhere.
That's wonderful. We'll definitely put all of that in the show notes so anyone who wants to look you up can find you in any place you'd like to look things up.
Any place, pretty much anywhere at all. I haven't started triangulating yet.
Well, Shannon,
my goodness,
so much for being on. This has been so much fun. And we will, I'm sure, be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've had a ball.